Welcome to the Max Future Weekly Podcast. All Apple talk and no chit chat.
Okay, welcome to episode 66 of the Apple Podcast, and this is Lex at maxfuture.com, and it's April 8th, 2011. Hey, and it's been, not as crazy a week in Apple world, but it's still been very interesting, and so we have a lot of interesting things to talk about this week. So let's see what there is to talk about. So the first story is that I decided to jailbreak my iPhone 4 again. And I had previously broken it, but I had to undo the jailbreak because I upgraded to iOS 4.3.1 so that I would have the AirPlay feature on the iPhone. AirPlay is that feature where you can send audio or video if you're on a common Wi-Fi network with the Apple TV, the new one, or certain other devices. You can send the audio or video wirelessly to some other device or to some other TV. It's a very cool feature. Now, unfortunately, when iOS 4.3.1 came out, there was no untethered jailbreak available for the iPhone. By untethered, it means that if you shut down the iPhone, you don't need to be tethered to iTunes or a computer to reboot it. And so the best form of jailbreaking is that. Now, jailbreaking of the iPhone has been considered legal for some time because the Library of Congress said it was legal. And the question I had to myself was, when I switched to iOS 4.3.1 and the jailbreak community had not come out with a jailbreak for it, was do I really need the jailbreak? Because Apple has incorporated a lot of features in the newer iOSs that sort of obviate the jailbreaking, particularly on the iPad. Because the iPad now has the ability to do mirroring out through an HDMI connection, at least the iPad 2. But I really missed the jailbreaking, and it was mainly one app in particular that made me really miss it. And that app in particular is My3G. My3G is the jailbreak app. And what's great about My3G is that it frees your iPhone from the limits that Apple and AT&T put on the iPhone in terms of what can be downloaded over 3G. And here's the thing. Apple, probably because of pressure from the carriers like AT&T and more recently Verizon, limits the amount of data you can download in a file on 3G. So in particular, apps that are over a certain size and podcasts that are over 20 megabytes cannot be downloaded over 3G. Now, this is a real problem if you're not near a Wi-Fi area and you need a new podcast. So this is one of the reasons I really couldn't live without the 3G, because where I work, I don't have Wi-Fi, and sometimes I run out of podcasts, and I'm going home, and I want to listen to one on the way home. So that's good. And also, sometimes I want to download apps, and I can't because they're over 20 megabytes. The other thing is that Apple doesn't allow you to use FaceTime over 3G, only over Wi-Fi. Now, FaceTime is this amazing service Apple has where you can do Buck Rogers-like video calls to people, and it's seamlessly built into the iPhone 4. And at the beginning, it worked with only calling another iPhone 4, but now you can call a Mac that has the FaceTime client on it, or the iPad, particularly the iPad 2, which has cameras on it. So it's a great communication tool, but it's currently limited to only working on Wi-Fi. And My3G, which is just a few bucks, essentially what it does, it fools the iPhone into believing it's on Wi-Fi when it's on 3G only. So apps like FaceTime work over 3G, and similarly, the downloads of the podcast when they're over 20 megabytes work. And frankly, I have unlimited data from AT&T. I have a plan, I'm paying $30 a month, and why is AT&T limiting me? Why is Apple limiting me? It's not like I'm downloading gigabytes and gigabytes of data. I just want to be able to download a podcast every now and then. It's over 20 megabytes. Frankly, I should be going for the cheaper plan, which is only $25 a month at 2 gigabytes, because I hardly ever surpass the 2 gigabyte limit of the $25 plan. So, look, it's perfectly legal to jailbreak. The Library of Congress said it's legal. And so I just couldn't hold out any longer, and I jailbroke my iOS 4.3.1 iPhone, and I'm glad I did. Okay, so what is the future of the iPhone and iPad in terms of its screen? Well, there's a really interesting story in electronista.com. I guess it's reporting on other news found by Patently Apple, which looks into patents filed by Apple. And basically the story is that Apple is working or has patents that are been filed on working on creating new displays in the future that would have all the benefits of the current LCD screens that the iPhone and iPad have, but also have the benefits of the e-ink screens that the Amazon Kindle has. Now, why would Apple do that? Well, if you're not familiar with the iDevices or the Kindle, here's the difference. Amazon's Kindle has e-ink technology. In e-ink technology, there's no backlighting to the screen. And the advantage of that is this twofold. One, you can read printed media like newspapers or books on it, and there's no glare from sunlight. So it's good for reading outdoors. The other thing is that e-ink doesn't use a lot of power. It's static, and it doesn't use a lot of battery time. So that means like the Amazon Kindle can go for a very long time without a charge because it doesn't take much power to power e-ink. Now, the downside of e-ink is that it doesn't refresh very quickly. And by refreshing, it means that you really can't play video or any sort of animation on e-ink. It's very static. So you can't really play games or watch, movies or TV shows or, just have the same interactive experience that you do with the LCD screens on the iPhone and the iPad. Of course, the advantage of the iPad and the iPhone screens are that you have this incredibly interactive touch screen where you can watch video, you can play games, you can do all sorts of stuff, and it's very rich and beautiful. The downside, though, to these LCD screens are that, one, the battery life isn't as good, as on the e-ink. So that means really you can go 10 hours on the iPad in use as opposed to, a whole month. The other thing is in sunlight you get a glare, with the LCD screen. So you can't really. You also lose a little bit of the brightness and the contrast when you're in really bright sunlight, because the light, it's not designed to work with light bouncing off of the front of it. So according to this article, the U.S. Patent Office discovered Thursday that Apple suggested that it has developed a breakthrough in display technology, and it's called Systems and Methods for Switching Between an Electronic Paper Display and a Video Display. And apparently Apple filed this in 2009, but it just became public now. But it sounds from the article that what Apple's doing is it would sandwich e-ink screen on top of an LCD screen. And it's also working on a way to seamlessly move back and forth. So depending on what application or program you're running, without you doing anything, it would quickly switch between e-ink for some part of the screen to LCD for the other part of the screen. And, if you read this article, it sounds like, these layers of e-ink and LCD are just sort of thinly sandwiched on top of each other. But look, I think this is fantastic. Anything that Apple can do to get the best of both worlds would be great. Now, it may be that for now Apple can't do that unless it sandwiches the two technologies. Now, it could be that some manufacturer like Samsung or somebody else who makes these screens is working on some new breakthrough product that would have the best of both worlds. But in the meantime, it looks like Apple is trying to use the existing technology, use the existing e-ink technology and LCD and fuse it together to make a more compelling screen. So I'm all for that. Now, I want to talk about something really weird that happened to me today on my iPhone 4. Now, recently I re-jailbroke it, and I don't know if that had something to do with it, but something very strange happened. I told you how I put the My 3G jailbreak app on my iPhone 4 so I could download podcasts that were over 20 megabytes. So today, at the end of the day, before I was going to head home, I decided I wanted to download another 5x5 podcast. This is the latest episode by John Syracuse and Dan Benjamin on the Hypercritical podcast, which I listened to. So I went to download it, and I downloaded it through iTunes. It was more than 20 megabytes, but then I noticed it wasn't in my iPod in the podcast area. And so I kept trying to find it. And when I wanted to go back to iTunes to re-download it, it thought it had already downloaded it. So I couldn't download it again. And so I kept looking in my iPod app, and I couldn't find it there. So I decided to do this. The task bar at the bottom that you can open in iOS 4, I have a little trick where I want to reset iTunes. When iTunes thinks I've downloaded something, I just kill it from the background state that it's in the taskbar area. So I killed it so it would be a fresh new iTunes to download. So here's the thing. After I killed it, and I also killed the iPod app. I killed it so that it would restart. It wouldn't be in the background. The weirdest thing happened when I killed the iPod app. I opened the iPod, and there was no content in it. And I had a lot of music, a lot of video, a lot of stuff in it, but it was all gone. Everything. It was just completely gone. Very weird. And the irony is, then I decided, I had even downloaded the Hypercritical podcast, John Syracuse and Dan Benjamin. I had downloaded that, and that was missing too. So I restarted my iPhone, and I launched the iPod app, and all the content was gone except the Dan Benjamin, John Syracuse podcast episode that I downloaded. How weird is that? So I don't know what that is. I don't know if that's part of it could be that, the My 3G did something weird, that screwed up the iPod app. So, I guess be careful if you're going to use My 3G, because it could do funny things to your jailbroken iPhone. But I'm not too worried because everything is backed up, and I have all the podcasts and music and all that on my Mac, so I'm not too worried that I'll get it all back. So anyways, interesting story. Okay, so one of the more colorful stories this week, actually today, is that Steve Wozniak says that he would consider returning to Apple. And this story is on Reuters.com from Georgina Prodham. And what she says is, I guess Steve Wozniak is in Brighton, England, and he says he would consider returning to an active role at Apple, the company he founded, and believes the consumer electronics giant could afford to be more open than it is, he told Reuters. So the Reuters article says he said, quote, "I'd consider it, yeah," the 60-year-old computer engineer said in an interview when asked whether he would play a more active role if asked. He found, then it goes on to say he founded Apple in 1976. And so Wozniak was in the English seaside town of Brighton for a computer server conference and to present a software developer award. So look, he's still on the payroll for Apple. They give him some sort of, small salary, but he gets health insurance, and he's been, on the payroll, even though he stopped working really at Apple in 1987. I think his current wife has a job at Apple. So do you think Apple would take him back as a leader of the company? I don't know, because even I read his autobiography, and he wasn't really active in the leadership of Apple in the early days. He pretty much ceded the leadership of the running the company to Steve Jobs in the early days. He was very happy to be a developer. So I'm not sure what kind of leadership role he would have. I think a great role for Wozniak would be to be sort of a visionary, to say, hey, these are the kinds of areas that Apple should go into. But the thing is, he's too much of a geek and too techno savvy, because he really doesn't understand consumer mass markets. And Steve Jobs' genius is really that he's geeky enough to make great products, but yet has a keen sense of marketing and understanding the masses. Because Apple's not a geek factory. Apple's strength is really knowing what the consumer really wants that's innovative and making it accessible to everyday people. If anything, the iPad is an attempt by Apple to be more accessible to people. So I don't know. I don't know if and Apple's become now, it's the second largest corporation in the world. So I don't know if he would really fit in that kind of culture, having a high up corporate position. I mean, Apple's probably less stodgy than major corporations, but still, it's like, it's a massive Fortune 10, Fortune 2 company. And I don't know if Steve Wozniak could get into the role of going to board meetings and making presentations in a formal way. He seems to be having too much fun as one of the co-founders of Apple who's no longer working at Apple and running around doing all sorts of cool things. So I'd be surprised if he was asked back by Apple in some sort of formal, very senior corporate role, or that he'd want that. Now, one thing that we should all be worried about is that some major apps on the iPhone may be violating not only Apple's prohibitions about collecting private data about you when you use the app, but actually also may be violating the law. And one of the most disturbing things is that one of the companies that's being investigated, not by Apple, but by federal prosecutors in New Jersey, is the app Pandora. Pandora is that fantastic streaming music app. And according to a news story on MacNN.com, federal prosecutors in New Jersey are investigating a number of smartphone application developers, including Pandora, and they're actually reporting in a Wall Street Journal article. And so the information that's being gathered by some of these apps that are being investigated by criminal prosecutors include GPS location, gender, age, device identifiers, and they then pass on the information to advertisers, including associates, addresses, occupations, and names. So, according to the Wall Street Journal, testing by the Journal and a company called Veracode showed that many apps gather information without informing the user, which is a potential violation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. And the story says that Veracode specifically looked at Pandora Radio for Android, which the Journal said communicated continuous GPS location, age, and gender information along with the phone's unique identifier code to 5 different advertising networks. It also goes on to say that advertising information was also sent out in the iOS version, but not to the same degree. And, the story says that Pandora and other developers have acknowledged in SEC filings and press information that they are being investigated. But they say that they are not apparently the subject of the investigation. So this is kind of disturbing. I mean, I know Apple is, much better than Android at limiting the kind of personal information that apps can pass on to the developer or to third parties. And actually, a lot of times, Apple requires you to affirmatively opt in to have information shared with the app or the developers, such as GPS information. So if these apps are doing stuff beyond what the law provides and beyond what Apple allows, they could be in for criminal sanctions or civil sanctions. So it's something we should watch. And look, as we're in this age where we have these incredibly powerful devices with all sorts of sensors, and we want to make sure that they don't spy on us, because it's not just, that we could enter an Orwellian world where the government spies on us, but rather an Orwellian world where the corporations spy on us. Now, speaking of which, one of the apps that I discussed last week is this crazy color app. The color app allows you to, it's this new app that's free that is social networking, where you can take a picture, and then depending where you are, it pulls together pictures taken by other people who happen to be near you running the color app. And it's unclear how close other people, strangers, have to be to you so that your pictures are shared with theirs. But I was listening to the one of Leo Laporte's podcasts, and people on the show said that the color app, without saying this anywhere, actually it was Robert Scoble, who's big on the internet, but he said that the color app analyzes the sound where you are to see what it is and compare it to other people's apps collecting sound, so that it can pinpoint where you're at the same place or what you're doing. And Robert Scoble and Leo Laporte had a debate about whether or not, the color app developers were secretly recording the audio where you are. And Scoble was saying, no, they're just analyzing the waveforms. And Leo Laporte was saying, well, no, it's that's like recording. And I think Leo Laporte's right, because if you have the waveforms, essentially that is recording. Digital recording of audio is essentially digitally tracking the waveforms and then reassembling them, and that's how you can recreate a sound. So we should all take this story very seriously, because we love our iPhone, we love our iPad, we like our Mac, but our computers could be tracking us. And some tracking with our consent is okay, but we don't want to be under secret surveillance by corporations sharing the data with advertisers. Now, one story that appears to be upsetting some Mac developers is a story that a Mac app called QuickPick has been removed from the Mac App Store. And what QuickPick is, and this is according to a story by the MacNN.com, QuickPick is a Mac application and document launcher that resembles what's going to be the launcher in the Lion operating system for the Mac. Because the Lion operating system for the Mac is going to have something called Launchpad, which looks a lot like the interface where you have your apps on the iPad, but it's going to be on the Mac. Well, according to the developer of the QuickPick app, Seth Willits, he got a notification from Apple, which said it had decided to remove retroactively QuickPick as being too similar to 10.7's Launchpad. Actually, this is what he said on his blog. You can still get the app from his website, but you can't get it through the Mac App Store anymore. So, is this fair? I mean, it was already in the App Store, and Apple is retroactively going back and taking something out because it duplicates what Lion can do. And you know what? I don't think that is fair. What if... So, I mean, this is going to really upset developers. You create an app, let's say Apple approves, and then later on Apple decides to do the same thing. So that means they can kick you out of the Mac App Store. I mean, that's really not nice. I mean, I'd understand having clear guidelines saying you can't create X for the Mac, but not having the clear guidelines and then allowing an app to be sold through the Mac App Store and then later on pulling it is kind of, mean and insensitive to Mac developers. And, I hope Apple reconsiders that policy. Because what's the big deal? It's not. Is it really going to harm users of the Mac who have Lion to have this other third-party app act as a launcher? I don't think so. I think if if anything, it might get you more interested in the technology and more interested in upgrading to Lion. Okay, so good news if you're an iPhone fan, and if you're hoping that the iPhone 5 will come out in June of this year. Now, prior to today, there's been back and forth as to whether or not the iPhone 5 will be released in June like it has in the past 3 or 4 years. And the reason is because Apple has made it clear, I guess either directly or through third parties, that WWDC, which is Apple's developers event in June, will not have hardware revealed. Now, why is this disturbing to some people? Because historically, Apple launches the new versions of the iPhone at the WWDC convention. And so a lot of people said, well, this means that the iPhone 5 is delayed. And there had been rumors that it was going to be delayed and that it's not coming out till the fall. Well, now, again, from the website MacNN.com, there are stories or rumors suggesting that the iPhone 5 will be released in the summer. And the article is entitled, Pattern of Activity Suggests iPhone 5 in the Summer. And the article says the iPhone 5 is still on track for the normal June or July release date, and analysts suggests. And then it goes on to say that Ticonderoga Securities' Brian White explains that while there's no smoking gun pointing one way or another, there is a pattern of activity in motion with the supply chain that makes us question a delayed launch, end quote. He then goes on, the article goes on to say various reports have hinted that the iPhone 5 might not be announced at WWDC and could ship as late as the fall. He then goes on to say Apple is, quote, Apple is keeping its iPhone 5 cards extra close to the vest on this launch to avoid a fall off in iPhone 4 demand ahead of a refresh, especially given the February launch of the CDMA iPhone 4 with Verizon, end quote, adds White. Rumors have nevertheless pointed to the device getting features like an edge-to-edge screen and or NFC near-field communication support. So what? I think this makes total sense. Think about this. If Apple is afraid, if everyone thinks the iPhone 5 is coming out, it's going to slow sales before June if that's when the iPhone 5 is coming out. So what if Apple instead creates like this other rumor that it's not coming out till the fall? Let's say it leaks this rumor that it's going to be in the fall, but really it's coming in June. Then people continue thinking, well, geez, I don't want to wait till the fall to get a new iPhone. And they go ahead and buy it. And so that way there's not a slowdown. I mean, it's kind of manipulative. But, I understand it. I have friends who are still on the 3GS iPhone or even the 3G, and they want to get the iPhone 4. They couldn't get them before because their AT&T plans weren't really at the point of a full update. Now they are. And some of them were about to go out and get the iPhone 4. And I said, no, wait. The iPhone 5 is probably going to come out in June. But then they saw the story that it might come out in the fall. So they're like, no, I'm not going to wait. I'm going to get the iPhone 4 now because I can't wait for the iPhone 5 till the fall because they've been waiting so much anyways. So, I'm trying to, and I've told them, you know what? I think Apple's still going to come out with the iPhone 5 in the summer. I think there's a number of reasons. I didn't think of this reason. My other reason, which I discussed last week, is that maybe Apple doesn't want to announce the iPhone 5 at WWDC because that's mainly a developers event. Maybe Apple wants to announce a little later at an event that's more consumer-oriented. And maybe because at WWDC, Apple is going to announce the new iOS 5 operating system, and maybe Apple wants to give developers time to get the iOS 5 apps or get the apps conformant to iOS 5 so that they will be ready to go on the iPhone 5. So maybe the delay is late June or July. Mid-July might give developers enough time between WWDC, which is at the beginning of June, to modify their apps to work with the iOS 5. So, but this other argument makes sense that, Apple isn't going to come out and say there's going to be a new iPhone 5 because it'll slow down sales. But Apple has to, I think, come out with an iPhone 5 sooner than later because the Android market is putting a lot of heat on Apple there's all sorts of Android devices coming out left and right that have all sorts of specs that claim to be greater than the iPhone 4. So Apple can't really delay these upgrades beyond a year. Apple really needs to continue its pattern of upgrading the hardware of the iPhone every year. So my money is on Apple upgrading the iPhone in June or July. So I agree with this story. Now, if you like content like movies and sports on your iPhone or iPod Touch, things just got a lot better. A story came out this week that ESPN, the sports network, now introduces iPhone and iPod apps for live sports TV. And this comes on iPodNN.com. And it says that the ESPN has given the iPhone and iPod Touch owners a bonus for being subscribed to traditional TV on Thursday through its new Watch ESPN app, which is free in the App Store. And essentially the app lets viewers watch live ESPN, ESPN2, and ESPN3 and ESPNU with a schedule to show both active and upcoming events. And it says that the system tries to shelter TV providers and requires a sign-in from a cable or satellite account to get access. It says that the initial version will let those on cable TV from Bright House or Time Warner Cable watch, as well as those on Verizon's fiber-based Fios TV. And it also says that iPad users can use the current app upscale today, but a truly optimized iPad app version is due in May. So this is very cool. You know, like I'm going to try to test this out. I have ESPN on Time Warner Cable, and I'll download the free app. Now, the thing is, I also have the Time Warner app, which has various channels on the iPad, and I find it, I still haven't configured it because I essentially have to log in. I have to find my password for my Time Warner account and get the iPad version going. And I mean, that's my only frustration with these cable apps. You have to like configure it. You have to, go in and find your password and your cable account and then get that to work with your ESPN account. And it sounds like it'll work over 3G. I'm not sure. Maybe it's only Wi-Fi. We'll have to see. Well, it looks like it's not limited to Wi-Fi. I'm looking at the description of the Watch ESPN app in the store, and it says access Watch ESPN live videos determined by your TV provider, and it says stay connected to live sports and shows from ESPN wherever and whenever you want them. So it sounds like it goes over 3G. So I don't know. The comments, though, are very mixed in the App Store. One of the more recent comments, which gave it 1 star, says, I remember recommending to ESPN to have ESPN3 on the Apple mobile devices, and it is finally here, but it does not work with my provider, and it is a major letdown. I guess a lot of the people who are upset are people who have ESPN but don't have it from the two providers, Time Warner or another, that currently provide it. So who knows? We'll have to see. There is this trend now. We saw it earlier with Time Warner having this streaming channel service on the iPad, and then Amazon allowing you to upload your music and stream it. It looks like a number of companies are getting aggressive with allowing streaming of content that you already have a right to. So in instance, the ESPN app is giving you the right to see ESPN on your iPad, where you already have the right to see it on your TV. So I applaud that. So we'll have to see how it works. Now, one of the coolest things that I've seen come out on the web recently is something offered by a small company called Transmedia. And I guess Transmedia recently exhibited and showed off its service and software at an All Things D conference that the Wall Street Journal puts on. And basically, this company has a cloud service, which is really ambitious because it looks like it's competing not only with Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, and Google, but it's also competing with Google. So basically, this company offers a free toolbar for your Mac or Windows or Linux browsers. So it works on 3 different computer platforms. And I saw a little video of the guy who's the head of this Transmedia company, and the software or the service is called Glide, and he said he's sort of like the Switzerland of the different platform battles between the Mac and Windows and Linux, because essentially in the cloud through this browser toolbar, you can get access to all sorts of things beyond cloud storage. And in other words, through the cloud, you can get a range of web applications and services that make the browser the center of the computing experience. And the toolbar basically acts as a cloud operating system within like your web browser. And you can have available files synchronization. You can have web applications, web capture, and social media tools. And basically, it gives you 30 gigabytes with the free version and 250 gigabytes of storage for $50 a year. That's a lot. So, and the thing is, it's accessible through your iPad app, your iPhone app, and through any browser. So it looks like you can do stuff like edit documents, run a music player, run different programs, and it's only going to expand. So this is very interesting, and Apple should pay attention. Maybe Apple should buy this Transmedia company, because Apple is lagging Google in the cloud and maybe even Amazon. And, this small company appears to be doing something extraordinarily ambitious in the cloud, essentially having a computer in the cloud that works across all platforms through the browser. So, I would check it out. It works on the Mac, and it's free, at least the first 20 gigabytes or so. Okay, one of the strangest apps that appears to have come out is something, or it's about to come out, is something that the New York Times reported on recently in a story called Aurasma Enhances Search with Images and Videos. And the story basically says that the line between cyberspace and the physical world is blurring with a new search technology being demonstrated by Autonomy, a British software publisher. And according to the article, this Aurasma, that's spelled Aurasma application, which will be on the iPhone, adds image and video to the search results returned to a user. And, so basically, it's a software-based machine vision recognition system intended for smartphones and tablets. So it's sort of like an augmented reality app. And the software is based on something called the company's idle pattern recognizer, which has been stripped down to run on the iPhone 4. And it uses the iPhone computing power to correctly insert the video image into the scene captured on the screen of the handset or tablet by its camera. So it says in a demonstration the company was able to duplicate the effects seen in Harry Potter movies of newspapers with the people in their pictures coming to life. The software finds a video of an event captured in the photograph. Wow, this sounds really hard to imagine. That's the problem with this technology. It's so advanced that it's almost reality distorting. And it says here that Autonomy plans to make the Aurasma app available as a free application on smartphones next month. So this is going to be, really kind of wild. I guess you'll take a picture of something, it'll figure out what picture you took and then turn it into a video based on, whatever else it has stored in there. So, I don't know. That's my understanding of it. It sounds very cool. So we'll have to see what it is. Okay, so good news for Apple in the litigation area. Now, you might have remembered a while back, Apple lost a jury award against it in the amount of $625 million for patent infringement, supposedly involving the company's latest operating system. And this happened before a jury in Tyler, Texas. Well, after the verdict, I guess Apple moved for a directed verdict, which means the law and the facts are so much on its side that the court should set aside what the jury has done. And the story is that the judge set aside the $625 million jury award. And the judge wrote that no reasonable jury could have concluded that Apple directly infringed MirrorWorld's patent claims. And the claims had been, I guess there was a company called MirrorWorld, convinced a Texas jury that it had invented the technology behind Time Machine, Spotlight, and cover flow features of the Mac OS X. And I don't know. I mean, I guess the guy was like some professor at Yale or somewhere who claimed that it had come up with the concept. And the judge found that much of the plaintiff's case rested on, quote, bald recitation, end quote, of cover flow features and analogies about the similarities between it and MirrorWorld's technology. It goes on to say, but the Tyler, Texas-based software company lacked, quote, supportive reasoning, end quote, about how they were substantially similar. The judge continued. I'm getting this from a website called Courthouse News Service. It also says MirrorWorld may have painted an appealing picture for the jury, but it failed to lay a solid foundation sufficient to support important elements it was required to establish. So look, I don't know enough about intellectual property litigation or patent infringement, but the concept behind Spotlight and cover flow seems pretty generic, and it just seems a little unfair to say that Apple just stole the idea. I mean, it'd be one thing if Apple got the actual code from MirrorWorld and didn't pay MirrorWorld, but, come on. The concept of Spotlight is kind of universal, and I just don't like what's going on with these lawsuits left and right where pretty much obvious concepts are being sued over. So, the amount of money wasn't that significant from Apple's point of view because it was $625 million. I mean, that's a lot of money for you and me, but Apple has something like $60 billion in the bank. So $60 billion, I mean, this is 1/1000th of how much, actually more than that. It's 1/10,000th of how much Apple has in the bank. So it's not very significant in that sense. So interestingly, what Mac should you buy at this point? And I say this because someone at work recently who had a very old computer decided he was going to get an Apple Mac or some sort of product. And after much hemming and hawing, he decided to purchase the MacBook Air, the 13-inch model, for him and his wife, and to use as their primary computer. And they got it, and they initially liked it, but he was a little concerned about the size. And I said, well, why don't you, use a big monitor with it? You can hook up a second monitor to a MacBook Air and have a bigger screen when you're there. But in talking about what kind of computer to get, I told him originally that maybe the ideal combination you want is the iMac as your base station because you can store a lot of data. They have big storage in the iMacs, and you have a lot of power. Plus, you have a big screen. And then for the mobility, you don't need a lot of computer power. Why don't you get an iPad? Get maybe the $500 iPad, and that way you have something that you can roam around the house or the apartment, go on the road, and as opposed to getting, let's say, a MacBook Air or getting the MacBook Pro. And he's now going to return his MacBook Air and get a 20-inch or a 21-inch, whatever, iMac and an iPad. And I said to him, you know what? It's only worth really getting the mobile Mac, whether it's a MacBook Pro or the MacBook Air, if you truly need to be mobile and have full computing power. So if you're a professional that really uses all the maximum features of a computer for, to be on the road, like getting your work done, and not just browsing the internet or reading email or listening to music, that sort of thing, then I would get a MacBook Pro or a MacBook Air. But if you're instead doing your main computing when you're at home or in the office, I would get the iMac as your base station and then get an iPad. So anyways, I think in the end he's going with that combination, and I think that totally makes sense. Okay, so one of the more colorful stories concerns how people are making money jailbreaking. And we talked about jailbreaking earlier today, but it's not just making money as a developer who makes jailbreak apps or as the person running the Cydia jailbreak store. There's a story out in the Washington Post about how everyday people are providing jailbreak consulting services for people who don't know how to jailbreak and making a decent living doing that. And the Washington Post has an article entitled "Student Makes $50,000 a Year Jailbreaking iPhones." And the article is about a student named Kevin Lee, who's a senior at George Mason University in Virginia. And according to the Washington Post, he's turned the iPhone jailbreaking into a full-time job. And he's earned something like $50,000 a year doing that. Apparently, he uses Craigslist to advertise his services, which include unlocking, jailbreaking, and customizing devices to a user's preference. And according to the article, he started off with just maybe having 5 to 10 customers a week, and now he gets something like 30 to 40 customers performing what he claims to be a relative simple hack. So, the thing is, I think it's legal what he's doing because the Library of Congress in last year basically said that jailbreaking the iPhone is legal. Now, Apple doesn't like it, so maybe Apple, goes after this guy and sues him. But I think what he's doing is legal. I mean, it is your device, and if you need help jailbreaking it, why can't you pay someone to help you do that? So, we'll see that maybe there's more and more people who offer these services, and, it'll become a cottage industry. Now, one of the more controversial stories this week is a story, I guess a report that I read on Cult of Mac, and there's a report out that says that Android is going to control almost half of the smartphone market. And this story came out on April 7th, and as told in Cult of Mac, it says that that one research firm announced Thursdays that Apple's iOS platform will remain number 2, and that Google's Android platform will be number 1 for quite some time, and that it accounts for 49% of the world market by 2012. And I guess the company that said this is Gartner, and it says that Apple's iOS will peak in 2011, which is this year, with growth in the U.S. and Western Europe, but sales will be limited in emerging markets. And this comes from the analyst's name is Roberta Koza. And Roberta Koza says, quote, Android's position at the high end of the market will remain strong, but its greatest volume opportunity in the longer term will be in the mid to low-cost smartphones, above all in emerging markets. And it goes on to say, Koza forecasts Android's 2010 market share will double by 2015, increasing from 22.7% to 48.8%. Then goes on to say Apple's iOS will rise from last year's 15.7% to 19.4%, but fall to 17.2%. Now, I don't know. I mean, the thing about Android is that, it's very fractured. You get different flavors of Android on different devices, and this leads to quality control issues. And Google has basically confirmed that there are quality control issues by basically saying it's not going to release the next operating system that it's developing for iPads, because for tablets, it's worried that some manufacturers are just going to rush it out and make a poor implementation of it. So look, I think when Apple was exclusively on AT&T in the United States, it opened the door for Android to really take off on Verizon and other carriers. And also because Apple, makes the hardware. There are all these hardware manufacturers who will take the operating system Android and slap it on, and they have a lot of channel power right now. But I think in the long run, Apple, now it's distributing on Verizon, it's on AT&T, it's on many world markets. And so I don't think the price is going to be a problem for Apple, because Apple does sell the last generation iPhone for sometimes as low as $50, or sometimes you can get it for $29. So I don't think Android's just going to run away with the market. I think as it becomes clearer to people that they can buy a cheaper version of the iPhone, albeit last year's model, we're going to see more and more iPhone sales. So, I just think ultimately Apple having both the software and the hardware makes for a better experience, and Apple can compete on price with Android, and it seems to be doing so. So, I think I disagree with this analysis. I don't think Android's going to have a 50% market share in a smartphone market in a couple of years. Okay, so in addition to having sort of working on new displays that are going to be both e-ink and LCD, Apple also has patents that show that Apple is going to have really cool interactivity and displays on, of all things, the bezels around the iPhone and the iPad. Now, the bezels are essentially that part of the iPhone or iPad on the front or on the back that is not a screen. And according to Patently Apple, which is a website that goes through and mines Apple's patents, Apple is working on developing smart bezels, and they're not part of the screens, but rather would turn the bezels into secondary screens, which would have some electronic displays that could be indicators. In addition, Apple has filed patents to turn the backside of the iPad into touch controls. Now, I totally predicted this when the iPhone 4 came out, when I said that the iPhone 4's flat glass surface on the backside would be great for some touch controls. I think this totally makes sense. And, kudos to Patently Apple for finding these Apple patents. So what do you think? Apple's constantly trying to innovate, and think about how you could use that space around the screen and on the backside of an iPhone or iPad to control it. You could have touch buttons that are electronic, just sort of like digital videos or digital, images on the bezel to control what's on the screen. Similarly, what if you could touch with your finger the backside and have it appear as sort of an overlay fingers on the screen? You could control buttons while you're holding the iPhone with one hand. I've said this repeatedly in various podcasts and on my blog, maxfuture.com, and it appears that that's exactly what is going on. Now, one thing I want to talk about is a very cool app that really hits home for me. And why does it hit home for me? Because the app is something my building is using, and the app is something called Building Link, and it's free. And the way I discovered the app is because my apartment building recently upgraded its technology so that we have all these screens now in our hallways and in our mailroom. And while our building had a nice website before where you could go and get building information, it now has a website, an additional website, which it looks like this company Building Link supplied, where you can log into your account and see if you have any packages waiting for you at the door, or if you want to order any service or repairs for your apartment, or if you want to post a message and sell something to your neighbors in your building. And the cool thing is this account that you have through this building link website, which is really, the domain name of your building, it has a companion iPhone app. And it's really cool. The iPhone app, you can log into your account. You can see what instructions you've left for the doorman in your building. You can even, if you want to figure out how to get home, you just press, go back to my building, and it will show you the map to go to your building. And I guess more features will come to it. But the cool part is you can leave instructions for the front desk of your building just through the app. You can make repair requests to the building through the app and see what deliveries are waiting for you. And as I said, you also have the marketplace. So where you can sell things like electronics, arts, home furnishings. So look, what this means is, God, is the iPhone penetrating every day of life? I mean, what apps are we not going to see? Because look, this is becoming so mainstream now. My own building, which I never really thought my building was particularly high tech. There's a lot of old people in my building. The board of the co-op board here in New York that runs my building seems kind of old, but look how modern they are. Or rather, the iPhone has totally penetrated all parts of our society. And, I think we're going to see more and more of this. Okay, so one story I take exception with is a story that appeared on the Gizmodo website. And there was a story entitled, "Why Do I Have to Enter My Password Every Effing Time I Download Something on My iPhone?" And the quote from that I have on my blog from the Gizmodo is, quote, That's it. iPhone App Store, you are great. You have lots of cool and fun stuff, games, flashlights, that free unit conversion app I never used but hope I might someday. But your password policy is stupid. If it's free, I don't ever want to have to enter my password to download it. It's really, really annoying. This goes for free apps. This goes even more for free app updates. Well, I guess I'm not going to take issue with that part, because have you noticed that for things that are free in the iTunes app, like podcasts, you don't have to type in your password for podcasts that you want to download. It just downloads because it's free. So the question is, why are apps that are free requiring a password? Maybe I was trying to think of what could be the reasons Apple does that. Maybe Apple doesn't want people downloading, and actually here's why Apple is restricting it. Maybe the number of apps, free apps that are downloaded affects the rating of the popularity of the app, and it moves it up in Apple's matrix of like successful apps, which then give it greater publicity. So maybe Apple doesn't want, if you don't have a password, then somebody could just keep downloading the app to increase the numbers regarding how many app downloads there are. So maybe Apple wants to restrict one user downloading the app too many times to prevent spoofing. Now, wouldn't it have the same concern with podcasts? Maybe not. Maybe Apple doesn't highlight podcasts the same way it does apps, because apps can make money through advertising even when they're free. So I don't know. That seems to be a mystery. Okay, so finally, I want to end the podcast talking about Ray Kurzweil. And if you didn't get a chance to see it, you should check out Leo Laporte's interview of Ray Kurzweil on his Triangulation podcast. Now, Kurzweil is the famous inventor, author, and futurist. He had a lot to do with inventing OCR, which is optical character recognition technology. He also invented speech recognition and music sampling. He also is a proponent of something called the singularity. And what the singularity is his vision that computers and technology are progressing so fast that in the near future we may fuse with them and live longer and be significantly smarter and productive, that it's going to really change mankind. Now, I am, I sort of believe what he is espousing, and I'm simplifying it somewhat in discussing it. But I do think it connects to Apple in this way, because by making things like the iPhone, iPad, and other iDevices, Apple is bringing us closer to fusing computers into who we are and having computers supplement and expand our capabilities. And you should check out the almost 1 hour video podcast interview. It's episode 9 of Leo's Triangulation Video Podcast. But the point is this: to some extent, aren't we becoming something like what Ray Kurzweil is talking about in the singularity? We carry our iPhones around all the time, and we have, like in the palm of our hand, this computer that can answer questions on the fly, that's supplementing our brain power and our memory ability. Now with the ability to store all sorts of information, I don't have to search my mind for all sorts of stuff. For example, I have this program, 1Password, that syncs between my Mac and my iPhone, and it stores all sorts of complex passwords and login information, and I have it with me all the time because it syncs through Dropbox to the Mac, my iPhone, and my iPad, and so I have this with me all the time. So I don't have to memorize passwords anymore because they're all stored in there. And so what Ray Kurzweil is saying is that, look, technology is changing so fast that, you know what, by the year 2029, it's going to be so powerful and so fused with us that we're going to have robots that are smarter than us, and our beings are going to become like more advanced because we're going to have all this technology that's going to make us live longer and be smarter and more productive. So I don't know, maybe what's going on with Apple and the iPhone and the iPad and iDevices, maybe that is a step in that direction. So we'll have to see. And with that thought, that's it for episode 66 of the Apple Podcast. See you next week. Please check out the maxfuture.com website, and you have a phone number there where you can leave me a message on Google Voice, and I can play it also on the podcast. You can leave the voicemail at 617-826-9676. Thanks for listening.
This has been a Max Future production.